and to wait until invited to unmute their microphones. For members of the local liaison forum and the public who are attending via Zoom, but who are not panelists, there may be an opportunity to ask questions later. At that time, you will be invited to raise your hand via the button in the participant and chat pane. To open this pane, please click on participants and chat buttons on the bottom menu bar of your Zoom screen. Please do not raise your hand until questions have been invited, and only raise your hand if you want to ask a question. Members of the public watching on live stream on YouTube will be able to see and hear the proceedings, but will not be able to ask questions or raise their hands. I'm sure everyone will appreciate that this is a new way of conducting the local liaison forum, and there may be some teething trouble. But with a little patience and forbearance, I certainly hope that this will be a productive meeting. Having said that, I'm just going to ask the panelists to introduce themselves, please. So,
if I can start. Andrew Monroe, Programme Manager for Greater Cambridge Partnership. And if Paul Hinsley can identify himself next, please.
Good afternoon, my name's Paul Hinsley. I'm Project Manager for CSET's Phase 1. CSET's Phase 1.
So there's Paul, and you will hear from him later.
I'm Jane Osayime, Project Manager, CSET's Phase 2, GCP.
Who's that? John Batchelor here. I'm District Councillor for Linton and Vice Chair of the Forum. You should call people, Tony, I think.
Yeah, well, the admin people are doing that.
Well, nobody is at the moment.
Well, does Mike want to introduce himself? Or Colin?
Oh, yeah, hello. Colin Harwood, Principal Transport Planner at Mott MacDonald, and I'm Project Manager for CSET Phase 2.
Yeah, Oliver? Is Oliver there?
Apologies, I hadn't unmuted myself. Ollie Daffan, Mott MacDonald, Design Lead for Phase 1.
Sarah, please.
Hello, Sarah Bearpark, Mott MacDonald. I'm Environmental Lead for Phase 1 and Phase 2.
Have we had Mike Payne?
Mike, yes. Were you in, Mike?
Yes, I'm here now.
Okay.
Apologies for a slight delay. Yeah, just to introduce myself then, I'm Mike Payne. From Mott MacDonald, I'm the Consultant Project Director for Cambridge South East Transport Phase 2.
And we also have Roger Hickford.
Yeah, hi Tony. It's Roger Hickford, Deputy Leader, Cambridgeshire County Council, newly elected to the Greater Cambridge Partnership Board. I'm here just as an observer tonight, thank you.
Alistair, who's helping with the IT.
Hi, yeah, I'm Alistair Williams. I'm here from GCP and I am just doing tech support this evening.
And the co-host for this evening is Michaela. Is Michaela going to say a few words?
Hello, I'm Michaela Hetland. I'm organising the communications for the LLF meeting.
Right, so having introduced the panelists, that's including the GCP team and Mott MacDonald, we're going to move on to item number 2 on the agenda, which is the Phase 1 progress report and recommendations.
Tony,
these are the recommendations in...
Sorry to interrupt, it's James Montgomery here. I didn't introduce myself. I'm not sure the protocol of naming yourself on these meetings. I'd called myself Mott MacDonald Environment, right. So you probably didn't notice me. I'm James Montgomery. I'm from Mott MacDonald. I have a overarching environmental lead role across the GCP projects that we're supporting, which obviously includes CSET. So.
And I understand, James, that you and Sarah will respond to any environmental issues and questions.
That's correct, yes.
Right, okay, item number 2, phase 1, progress report and recommendations. So this is going to be presented by Paul Hinsley. There's
Okay.
After
Good afternoon. Sorry.
You've just seen this email of the slide of the objectives of the whole process.
Just a reminder of the objectives of both the phase 1 and phase 2 projects. I won't go through them one by one, but it's just there as the objectives that we are trying to address with all the South East Cambridge schemes.
Okay, so phase 1 progress report and recommendations. The recommendations are the recommendations set out in the agenda papers, which are going to the Greater Cambridge Partnerships Joint Assembly at its meeting on Thursday. So Paul is going to take us through this together with Oliver.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. So this is an opportunity to give the collective an update as to where we are with CSET's phase 1 over the 3 tranches. So I'll touch on tranche 1 first, which are works that have already been completed. So we've completed 3 schemes in tranche 1. Scheme 2, extra cycle storage at Babram Park and Ride, that's all been completed. Scheme 10, the advanced works, safety improvements to Dale Head Food Junction, and Scheme 11, Linton Village College signal upgrades. Current works which we're working on, tranche 2 works, and those are a combination of works that are coming at the back end of design, i.e. the design's complete, and it's gone to one of our delivery partners to get priced prior to going to site. Works that have already been completed and works that are due to start imminently within the tranche 2 scheme. So scheme 1, Graham's Road Junction, right turn lane. The site clearance works were completed early in March of this year. The main works are scheduled to go to site 2021 of next year. Scheme 3, Section 1, Linton Greenway. Works are due to commence on site May of next year. Scheme 6, signalised crossing and roundabout. We're due to commence both Scheme 6 and Scheme 7. End of June, beginning of July this year, 2020. Scheme 9, signalised crossing at Hildisham with the 2 Compegsus crossing. Those works are still in design stages. So the date when those are going to go to site due to land acquisitions and various other constraints are still in the balance at the moment. Scheme 10, peak area eastbound Buzz Lane approach to Linton College, that was completed successfully. Scheme 12, constraints, peak area eastbound Buzz Lane approach to Linton College. Scheme 12 has now been completed. Scheme 17, road safety improvements between Linton and Haverhill, average speed cameras, that's due to go to site this year in September. And Scheme 18, Babram Park and Ride, an extension to the existing park and ride facility at Babram, creating to go to site an additional 160 spaces, is due to go to site in 2021. Tranche 3 works. Scheme 3, Section 2 to 5, Linton Greenway, still in the design stages. Scheme 4, Haverhill, Gog Farm Shop, is due to go, well, the plan application has been submitted that week or early part of 21. Scheme 5, multi-user underpass, unfortunately that was cancelled. Scheme 8, multi-user crossing at the A11, footbridge underpass. Those works have now been transferred to phase 2, which Jane will discuss and talk through with you in conjunction with Andrew and the rest of my colleagues at some point later. Scheme 14, westbound Buzz Lane on the approach to B1052 junction, still in the design stage. And Scheme 15, Bartlow Road roundabout, again, still in the design stage, and we'll be going to site mid-21. Scheme 16, Dean Road crossing completed. So that's an overview of the 3 tranches which make up CSET's phase 1. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay, this next slide is an illustration of 2 schemes which I've spoke about previously that have now been completed. So scheme 10 is 100 metres new footpath and cycleway, new landscaping to verges, new white and yellow lining to carriageways, new bus stop to junction, and scheme 12, new yellow and white lining. Again, I said before, new signalised junction and resurfacing to the main carriageway and the junction. Next slide, please. Next slide.
It's up there.
Ah, there we are. It's just popped up on my machine. Apologies. Scheme design update. Now, what I'd like to do at this point is to bring Ollie some technical and an update to the design. Ollie, are you there?
Yes, yep, yep. So Linton Greenway has been broken down into a number of sections to assist in the design delivery of the scheme. Section 1 is the most northerly section between Addenbrooks and Park and Ride, which is the busiest section. And that scheme is currently design is complete and being priced up by contractor. Section 2, the design's currently going through the safety audit process for the detailed design of the scheme. But that's between the Baburn Park and Ride site and the Baburn Research Campus roundabout. Section 3 is the section that links up the Baburn Research Campus and crosses the A11, and due to the impending discussions around phase 2 and that route, that delivery of that section has been transferred to phase 2 so that the best solution can be found as part of that overall scheme to tie in with the options for that project. So section 4 and 5 picks up just south of the A11 and takes the Greenway through up to Linton Village, and we are just reached a design freeze stage at that of the end of prelim design, and are just commencing with the detailed design once we've received some additional survey information for that route. Scheme 9, the proposals previously were for a new signalised junction at Hildisham Village crossroads with Pampersford Road. The traffic modelling that's been carried out for that does show that the signals introduce some delays on the 1307 as a result of proposing that signalised junction. So we're currently undertaking a review to assess whether there's a refined solution to an improved crossing facility that can be provided at that location. that avoids significant delays to traffic on the 1307. We're also ongoing discussions with the landowner to link up to assist with part of the Greenway link up for that crossing as well. So scheme 9 is very much in conjunction with the section 4 and 5 of the Linton Greenway. Scheme 14, the westbound bus lane. So this is introducing a new bus lane to provide improved journey times for buses travelling into Cambridge, just south of Bartlow Road. And the scheme's currently at the prelim design stage, and we're having ongoing discussions with Stagecoach and Linton Parish Council in relation to the design of that scheme before we progress to detailed design. Okay, next slide, please. Scheme 15. So this is the proposal for a new roundabout and hub at the Bartlow Road interchange. We are currently just starting the detailed design for that scheme, and as part of that, currently undertaking a review of the rural hub proposals to ensure that it meets the requirements for providing such a facility in terms of a small facility for parking, and satisfies concerns raised from early engagement with the planning authority in relation to its use and viability as a hub. The scheme 4 proposals at Hayvale Road include the addressing of a key safety accident cluster site at the Hayvale Road Gold Farm Shop location, and has recently been submitted for planning as part of the in last week, I believe. And once the outcome of that planning permissions been determined, we'll be looking to progress that through detailed design and for construction. Next slide, please. Okay, so the next two slides relating to two traffic regulation order objections that have been received in relation to two of the schemes that have just been mentioned. So one is in relation to an extension of double yellow lines on Linton High Street with the traffic signals that have been installed recently. So the design proposals included an additional extension to the double yellow lines on the Linton High Street. If you can see on the bottom photo there, where the red barriers are, is where the double yellow lines were proposed to extend. And the reason they were proposed to extend was to allow additional space for traffic turning into Linton High Street to progress into Linton High Street without causing tailbacks onto the 1307. Since the signals, due to the objection, we weren't able to install the double yellow lines, but since the signals have been installed, we've carried out a survey pre-COVID lockdown in relation to where traffic was, whether the concern of traffic queuing back on the 1307 was a valid concern, and the results of that survey showed that there was an increased risk of the tailbacks occurring and therefore a risk of collision on the main 1307. As such, we're still recommending that the double yellow lines are extended in this location. Next slide, please. The second TRO objection was in relation to Scheme 14 for the proposal to install a new bus lane facility. And the concern over the provision of the bus lane for what was considered to be a small number of buses to the detriment of existing environments. As part of the prelim design, we've looked at options as to how best to mitigate the environmental concerns and ensure that the design proposals include that. We've also done some analysis of the traffic flows and the potential benefit from those 4 buses that occur in the peak hour, which is when most of the delay happens. and the scheme as it currently is presented does offer a benefit cost ratio of 1.68, which is defined as a median value for money as per the Department for Transport scoring. Okay, next slide, please.
Right. What I'd like to do is like to take questions on the general schemes first, and then questions or comments on schemes 12 and 14. I understand that Amanda Taylor has a question.
Hello, can you hear me okay?
It was a bit faint.
Is that better?
Yeah, much better, Amanda. Go on.
Hi, yeah. Amanda Taylor, County Councillor for Queen Edith. Scheme 5, which was an underpass at Wandlebury, was chosen out of a range of 2 or 3 different options, one of which was a flyover, I believe, one of which was an underpass. And it was to address the needs of pedestrians and cyclists crossing the road at that point. The traffic moves very fast and it's not really possible to cross in time because of the speed of the traffic. Just wonder if you can give us more detail about why that was cancelled, since it had strong local support, and what is in place to address the situation of the traffic speeds and facility of walkers, pedestrians and cyclists.
If I can address that question, Tony, is that the original proposed location of the underpass was on a desire line from Haverhill Road to Wandlebury. Due to ecological constraints, ecological sensitivity in the corner of the Magog Trust land, it was relocated to a location further down the hill, northwest of the Magog Farm Shop junction. At the same time, the cost of the underpass was forecast to be increasing significantly. As it was no longer on the desire line, the number of people likely to use it was less. And we did some further assessment work, and we came to the conclusion that at that location where it was moved to was no different to other locations on the A1307 in terms of similar speed, similar visibility, similar levels of demand, where we were not providing an underpass or a bridge. So in the face of what was becoming apparent as significant reduction in value for money and a suboptimal location, and the fact that we could provide for people to cross the road as they do elsewhere on the A1307 in safety, the underpass was withdrawn. This was discussed with the board in a board briefing, and it was also discussed in a workshop with stakeholders held at Copley Business Park. I can't quite remember the date, but there was a workshop there where we discussed the proposals in that section, and that included the underpass not being present. The cost in providing for equestrians was reaching £3 million. It was very poor value for money. It was no longer on the desire line, and we could provide equivalent facilities to elsewhere on the A1307. And I should add that the provision of it was being challenged by the County Council Road Safety Team as not being necessary in road safety terms.
Was there any consultation with local people in the area concerned?
There was this workshop that we had at Copley Business Park where we consulted with all the stakeholders. We also had several meetings with Cambridge Past, Present and Future, Magog Trust and the Gog Farm Shop.
Okay, well, thank you for that. James Littlewood has a question. James?
Hello, can you hear me?
A little louder, please, James.
Yeah, okay, can you hear me better?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, it was in relation to Scheme 3, which is the Linton Greenway. Ollie mentioned that the sections 2 to 5, the design has been completed and they're just doing some further work. I mean, they have, Ollie and his team have sort of been consulting with us and other people in developing that sort of some of the ideas for that, but we haven't, none of us, as far as I'm aware, certainly Cambridge Past, Present and Future hasn't seen a sort of latest design stage. And I didn't know whether it might be worth sharing that with other stakeholders before they maybe take that too far down the line, in case some of us have got some concerns about some of the things that might be in that.
Oliver?
Yeah, so on section 2, James, we've presented a scheme that was picking up some of the, a lot of the comments that came out of the consultation that Andrew mentioned at Copley Farm, and also any subsequent discussions that we'd had. We've just had that report back and are currently going through that. So I suggest it is probably a good time to potentially do one final look through the comments provided. Paul and GCP are happy for us to do that.
Okay, James?
Yes, if you can hear me, yes, that's fine, thank you.
Okay, Sam Davis is next in line. Sam?
Thanks, Tony. Hope you can hear me.
Yes, we can.
Thanks. I'd just really like to follow up on Amanda's point. It's news to me, as it was to her, that the underpass has disappeared. It's also news to me that the design of section 1 has apparently been finalised. The last input anyone local had to that, to the best of my knowledge, was a design evening held at St John the Evangelist, probably about a year ago. We've never seen any subsequent designs to that at all. I'm slightly bothered by the fact that decisions seem to have been taken without inclusion of residents at the Queen Edith end of this route.
Paul or Ollie, can you answer that question?
So as part, we have been having some discussions, but we probably haven't had a final consultation similar to what James has just suggested for some of the sections through that. That being said, I think we took on board probably the majority, if not all, of the comments from that last consultation, which we can share, and perhaps we cover that as part of the final section 1 and 2 session.
Okay, I mean that workshop last year was just that. It was a workshop. It certainly wasn't anything resembling a consultation. It was a group of people around a table one evening. So I'm just this seems to have moved on very rapidly and without a great deal of visibility.
I think, Sam, what the message the team is giving is that they've actually adopted most, if not all, of the comments that were made at that workshop. I accept that we perhaps should be more forthcoming in coming back to you with those proposals, and we will now do that. So there will be consultation with yourself and others from that area, indeed others along the route, such as James Littlewood, about the proposals going forward. And I'm sorry if you feel that you've been left out of the discussions. It certainly wasn't my intention.
Okay, thanks. That would be really helpful.
I'm going to move on to Robert Atwood. Robert? Is Robert there?
Hello?
Hello, Robert?
Yeah, can you hear me?
What, quite faint.
Quite faint. Hold on. Is that better?
Yes, it is better.
Blimey, that is loud. The Babram High Street junction, which was due to be started last December, there's no mention of that so far. Is that likely to come up or not?
It is able to go out to site very, very soon. It's been delayed because the County Council prevented any other works along the A1307 while there were works ongoing at Fendon Road. Fendon Road itself was delayed by unexpected utilities and then by COVID, which led the County Council to stop work for a period on all projects in the interest of health and safety. We're now in a position to move forward, but we're still constrained by works ongoing at Fendon Road. We're in weekly contact with the street works team at the County Council. It's all ready to go with the contractor. As soon as we can get a start date, we'll be out there.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jeff Hale. Jeff?
Okay, can you hear me?
Well, a little louder would be helpful,
Okay.
Jeff.
Is that better, Tony?
Yes, it is. Yes, thanks.
Regarding Scheme 4, the Haverhill Road Gog Farm Junction, we've seen the letter from Mott MacDonald saying the planning application. I'm talking on behalf of the Magog Trust, that the planning application has gone in. It wasn't clear from there when comments can be submitted, what the deadline might be for that. I wonder if someone from Mott MacDonald could comment on that.
Ollie, can you answer that?
I believe that so the documents have been submitted, so there'll be a week or two validation whilst they check they're happy that they've got everything before going out for formal comments on that. So I'd expect at some point this month there'd be a formal opportunity to add the comments on that. I haven't got the exact dates and timeframes of when it will be validated by the council.
Okay, thanks. That's what I suspected. So we'll probably receive something from the County Council in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm aware of one written question which has been submitted, and I'd like to read that out. A nice dual-use walk cycleway recently appeared behind Addenbrooks, connecting Dame Mary Archer Way with Babram Road, marked in red on the first attachment. Unfortunately, this has not been finished. Also, it leads precipitously and blindly onto the main Babram Road, and the exit is thus very dangerous.
I'll answer that one, Tony. That cycleway was a planning obligation on the developer Hill, arising out of the Nine Wells development. There were a number of objections from residents there to provision of the cycleway, or rather a connection into the Nine Wells development, which the County Council has been working through. The developer has now provided the cycleway. However, we believe that they are inhibited from completing the last section for exactly the same reasons as we are stymied with our works on Babram Road, which is the embargo placed by the County Council on other works in that area while Fendon Road roundabout is completed.
Right, well, I have no other...
The final section will involve a toucan crossing across Babram Road at that point.
Right, well, I have no other questions, but I would like to make a comment at this stage, and that is that in a number of previous LLF meetings, we've emphasised the importance of talking to local communities and local representatives about proposals, schemes in their areas. And I'm also aware of work where apparently from this presentation, the design work is quite advanced, but yet as a local parish council, with this going through our parish, we appear to know nothing about it. So I would emphasise the point again on behalf of all local communities and councils that it's important that they are involved at an early stage and are kept informed throughout the process as to where things are with schemes in their own particular area.
Thank you, Tony. I apologise that we perhaps have not maintained the pace of communication that we tried to set in the early days on this project. And we will take on board those comments and ensure that we communicate and discuss all our proposals going forward. There have been a number of changes in our team and our consultants, and I apologise if that has let anything slip between the cracks.
Okay, but I've now got a Sheila Bolden has wants to ask a question. Sheila? Sheila needs to be unmuted. Yes, Sheila, go on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, go on.
Oh, good. Looking at the question of the sections there, do we take it that the park and ride at Babram has now been finalised? That it is going to be the Babram option?
That's going to be discussed later on in the meeting. In the
right.
Yeah, so we'll come to that a bit later on.
Okay.
The one that's, sorry, Tony, just to pick up on that, the one that's referred to on the slide is a potential extension to the existing Babram Park and Ride site.
Oh, not the new one.
Not the new
Road Park and Ride site.
Ah, right.
Okay, John Burns. John.
Hear me okay?
Yes, John?
Yeah, can you
No, you're very, very faint.
really? I'm actually on headphones, so it should be okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, that's much better, thanks.
Okay. Yeah, it's actually a question about Scheme 14, which I'm not 100% certain whether you've actually, I mean, you've described it, but I know you mentioned it a bit later. I was looking at all the documentation for Thursday's meeting, and it mentions Stagecoach not talking about any extra buses or anything, which is pretty normal for them. In Haverhill itself, we're currently discussing detailed planning applications for another nearly 600 houses here going up. I can understand the concept of this bus lane, but it worries me intensely that all the figures are based around the X13 scheme, which only runs, as you know, 4 times during peak hours. But all the other buses go around all the villages, not just Linton, it goes around Horseheath, and it takes 45 minutes to leave Haverhill. And I don't know whether all those timings have been included.
What you've done is that, as you say, on this particular section, which is the section of the A1307 between Barclay Road and Linton, is that only the limited stop services use that section of the A1307. All the others go through Linton. We have had proposals which we've been discussing with Linton Parish Council for some time to try and ease the passage of buses through Linton. One of those which has come to fruition is to make it easier for the buses to get back out at the other end at Linton High Street, and also with the Barclay Road roundabout to make it easier for the buses to get into Linton and thereby make those bus services more attractive. Linton itself has proved to be quite challenging in terms of measures that we can deploy to make the passage of buses through there easier, partly to do with on-street parking in Linton High Street and other locations, which we have been in engagement with Linton Parish Council for some time. So the Scheme 14 addresses the limited stop services, and we certainly hope that it would lead towards there to be more opportunity to provide limited stop services. And as you will see from our phase 2 proposals later in this session, we are proposing that 2 of the services per hour that will go to the Trouble Hub at Babram will go on to Haverhill, and they will return. And as part of ensuring journey time reliability for those services, the bus lane at Linton is a key part of the proposals. Clearly, at the moment, we had attempted to negotiate with Stagecoach to establish an appetite to provide additional services. They've been indicated no appetite to do so, but of course we hope that maybe other operators can come into the market to provide the same.
Yeah, we'll say a little bit more about the Linton schemes in just a minute, but Barbara Keitel has indicated she wants to ask a question. Barbara?
Yes, hello. Basically, I was agreeing and questioning some of the previous statements that have been made. As a parish councillor for both Great Shelford and Stapleford, we have not been considered as stakeholders and therefore not been included in consultation. We haven't been in consultation for over a year. We have no idea what plans you are talking about because you haven't shown us the plans. And you're now saying that we can discuss in the future, but it'll be too late because the decisions have been made. So my question is, where is the consultation?
All these schemes were consulted upon in 2018.
But they have changed since then, if you'll excuse me.
They've changed, and I've accepted that some of those changes haven't been discussed as widely as they should be, and we'll put that right. But the LLF has been informed of most proposals at key stages, and we have talked to communities which are directly impacted, for example, Baberham Parish Council, Linton Parish Council. What we're talking about at the moment are the phase 2 or phase 1 proposals, 17 interventions along the A1307, and these were taken to public consultation in 2018.
Yes, but in terms of the Linton Greenway, you have changed the Wandlebury crossing due to the fact that it is not economic in any way, but you're not even proposing that it would be in a place where it would be used. So therefore, what's the point?
That is indeed the case, is that there would be no point in providing it in the alternative location that would avoid the ecological impacts. There was consultation about that, as it was raised at this workshop we had at the Copley Business Park. Unfortunately, maybe one of my colleagues would assist me.
Excuse me, Andrew, we were not invited to that.
I was about to say that I can't remember whether or not you were invited. Maybe one of my colleagues would correct me.
However, there is a planning application on this particular scheme, isn't there? And therefore, there's an opportunity for the parish council to respond to that planning application and to make their views known there.
I agree, Tony.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. Claire Arthurs, please.
Hi, can you hear me?
If it would help if you're just a little louder, please.
Okay. I have seen the Excel spreadsheets containing the public's comments on the 2019 consultation on the guided busway proposed through Shelford, Stapleford, and so on. But I've not been able to find anything which details your response to these valid concerns. So it's coming back to what Barbara's saying, really, but how will you be responding to the affected communities to explain how you have taken those comments into account? For example, environmental concerns about 9 wells and arable land being lost and traffic flow on Hinton Way, etc.
Yeah, I think we're going to leave that question until we come to the phase 2 proposals and the route, if I can.
Okay.
Okay.
Tony, before you go on, it's John here. There's a lot of questions in the Q&A section, which we certainly won't be able to deal with all of them. Can we take it that officers will separately respond to these?
Yes, they will. Yeah, I've only just got one more question lined up, and that is from Brian Milnes.
Thank you, Tony. I wanted to concur with Barbara Keitel's statements and others as well. I think the last meeting that members of the LLF were invited to was at Homerton College about a year ago. Does that sound about right? And neither as a parish councillor nor as LLF member have I seen very much in terms of information or consultation, which is a bit disappointing. That's all.
Okay, well, thanks for that. We'll come on to the phase 2 proposals a little while later. I'd just like to turn to the 2 recommendations that are going to the Joint Assembly for their views, and that is about Scheme 12, Linton High Street, and about Scheme 14, the westbound bus lane at Linton. Does anyone want to make any comments about those? I have been approached for further information about the cost-benefit ratio of the westbound bus lane. And I'd just like someone, perhaps Andrew, to make some comments about that.
That was on one of the slides. The benefit cost ratio is 1.68, which places it in the moderate value for money category determined by Department for Transport guidelines.
Would you like to provide a bit more information back to Linton Parish Council, please?
Yes, we will provide a more detailed response.
Okay, right. Are there anyone who wants to make any comments about either of these 2 recommendations? Because I haven't got anyone who's indicated so far. Enid Bold. Enid?
Hello? Oh.
Could we connect Enid, please? You're on.
Hello?
Hello?
I'm very echoey.
Yes.
Hello, I've sent a couple of written questions.
Yes. To our technical help, can we do anything to improve that at all?
I'm afraid not. It's due to a speaker and a microphone being too close together, possibly at Enid's end, where she's talking and then her computer, her PC or her tablet is broadcasting that back into the speaker. So there's not much we can do with feedback, I'm afraid.
Is that better?
Can somebody pass that message on to her, please?
I think she said that she'd written a couple of questions in the comments box. So just scrolling down, there's 2 senior balls with name against it. One was in relation to the look into the markings for the filter lane at the High Street on the 1307 for Scheme 12 on the traffic signals. There was some early, once the signals were installed, there was some early driver behaviours that as people got used to the new layout. But there was nothing specific raised when the layout was audited once the scheme was in place that identified sort of potential improvements to markings. There's some final signal timing adjustments that need to be made at that one, so there's an opportunity to do a final review when those are made on site.
Okay, and the second question?
The second one was in relation to the objections to the loss of parking spaces by the early provision of the Bartlow Road Transport Hub, and questioning whether that could be moved forward. I haven't got the specifics of the words in front of me, but I believe the comment was around the parking in the vicinity on the high street, and so the distance between that and the rural hub, I'm not quite sure would fully address the concerns of the objection on that.
Okay.
Hello? No, it's still bad.
Enid, if you can hear me, we'll come and talk to you about all this as soon as we can. Maybe not in person, but maybe we can set up a session where perhaps the technology isn't fighting against us.
Thank you, Andrew.
Okay. Right. Well, in that case, I think we'll move on to item number 3, the Cambridge Autonomous Metro update.
Hi. We invited somebody from the Cambridge Peterborough Combined Authority to attend the meeting, but they were unable to do so. The CAM consultation was launched earlier this year and was completed in April ahead of publishing an outline business case. The proposals were fairly extensively supported, with something of the order of over 80% of respondents saying that they supported or strongly supported the proposal for the Cambridge Autonomous Metro. There's a concept of what it will look like on the screen, and as you are aware, Greater Cambridge Partnership is working with the Combined Authority to deliver the first 4 limbs of the project outside Cambridge. So can I have the next slide, please? So the green section is the so-called tunneled section in Cambridge, and at the bottom right you can see the element which is the Cambridge South East Transport Phase 2, extending from the biomedical campus out to the A11, and then for a future regional extension to Haverhill, which will be delivered by the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. We are working with the CAM project team on the development of proposals, and they, I believe, are intending to publish an outline business case by the autumn of this year for the next phase of the proposals.
Okay, so that was just a brief update on where we are with the Cambridge Autonomous Metro, of course, which is the wider concept. I haven't got any people asking questions or comments there, so I think we'll go on to what is Howard, Keitel and Barbara want to come in. Howard?
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes, go on.
Good. I was just going to ask whether the bus concept is set in stone, and to what extent the less risky light rail system is still a potential option in terms of fundability and practicality, taking up less space, being a guided system and well proven, how much more efficient that could be than just using a bus.
The question of light rail is still to a certain extent with the Combined Authority. However, we believe that they are favouring a trackless tram system using an articulated vehicle running on rubber wheels. But to a certain extent, we are dependent on their final reports on that. However, previous work published has identified the very significant costs of light rail, and it suffices to say is that there is nowhere in Europe using light rail with a city the size of Cambridge for an extent the size of the Mayor's ambition for the Cambridgeshire Autonomous Metro. So consequently, to deliver that ambition, they consider that lower cost infrastructure, lower cost vehicles are needed to derive the required benefit cost ratio. However, we are to a certain extent in their hands on their final decision making on that.
Can I just come back on that?
Go on quickly.
Just to say, I'm obviously no expert here, but one hears that in fact, once things are analysed, there is actually not a big difference between the cost of the two systems. I also understand there is a city in Germany with a smaller population served by trams. And in fact, if you're looking at Greater Cambridge and the Mayor's concept of CAM, populations do become very comparable indeed.
Cambridge has a very diverse hinterland and the extent of the full ambition to reach out to Haverhill, to Mildenhall, to St Neots and other places. The cost of doing that with light rail is considered to be prohibitive, and hence the search for an alternative technology. And as to the technology itself being unproven, there are systems in operation in Spain and France using this technology, and indeed it would have been used for this year's Tokyo Olympics.
Can I just come back on a question regarding COVID then? A bus is very, very difficult to manage in this epidemic, whereas a light rail tram system would give you that flexibility to a greater extent.
Yeah, I'm not sure I agree with that. Both are high density public transport vehicles in the peak hour. People would be close together, but I think we are to hope perhaps that COVID will become history. At the moment, who knows where this is going to end up. But at the moment, I think most people would regard this to be a temporary problem rather than a long-term problem. But I do not agree that there is a significant difference between bus and tram in that respect.
However, I think the most important point you're making is that this is really a decision for the Mayor and combined authority rather than a Greater Cambridge Partnership.
Indeed, yes, we work in partnership with them, but they are leading on the design and specification of the Cambridgeshire Metro system.
I'll turn to Barbara Keitel. Barbara, please.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. The point that I think we're trying to make as parish council in this region is that on all your plans, you very carefully put the Cambridge Biomedical Centre, you've very carefully put Linton and some weird sort of sign of A11, but you have no concept on that plan as telling us what's actually going to happen in between those two. And the point that we're trying to make is that all your costings consider that the busway goes along the disused railway, in which case it has to be separated from the railway line by quite a considerable construction. However, if you put light railway along, bearing in fact that you are using the disused railway from Haverhill all the way through to Sawston until you then divert and suddenly go off across pristine ecological land, as if you did light railway there would need to be no separation from the railway itself, from British Rail. And so the costings would be totally different. And we have yet to see any costings that could be actually discussed.
I'm going to push that question to when we come to the phase 2 discussions about the specific route and recommendations on the travel hub site and the route, if I may.
Thank you.
John Grant.
Hello. Yes, on the subject of light rail, there are, of course, there's the work going on in Coventry, which is looking at light rail for smaller cities. And there is also the question that a lot of the dangerous particulates are from rubber tires. You know, we're getting rid of diesel, we're getting rid of a lot of things that produce particulates, and the rubber tires are coming in as being a much more significant problem. So they really do need to look at light rail.
Could I perhaps ask Mike Payne to try and give an answer on the rubber tire question?
Well, both, if I may, Andrew. Mott MacDonald are very well aware of the work going on very light rail in Coventry, but this is very much research and development work. The technology simply doesn't exist in a deliverable form at the moment. So in terms of that being a proven technology, it does not exist at the moment. In terms of the issue of particulates. I think we need to remember that although we're talking about rubber-tired vehicles, we're talking about a relatively small fleet of vehicles with a very high passenger capacity, which are the purpose of the scheme is to attract people away from private car use and deliver mode shift to public transport. So by providing a very high quality public transport service using rubber-tired trackless vehicles that is capable of delivering mode shift away from the car, the outcome expected would be a net reduction in particulates from rubber tyres.
If I might say, I think that that sort of question is really best directed towards the mayor and the combined authority. So thanks for what you said, but I think they're going to be basically, as Andrew has indicated, it's really going to be the mayor and combined authority who make the final decision about how CAM is going to operate in terms of the type of vehicles and so on.
Okay.
Okay. Right, I'm going to move on to item 4, which is the phase 2 of the Cambridge South East transport, the options assessment. Then we're going to move on to public consultation and then the preferred option recommendation. So if we could go through the options assessment, please. So item number 4, now this is Mike Payne again.
If you could just give me 1 minute, Michaela's lost her internet connection, so I'm just loading up the presentation ready.
Okay. Right, so a slight technical hitch. I hope we'll all just bear with it for a minute or two. Here we are, Mike. It's up and running for you.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Good evening, everybody. I just want to take you briefly through the options assessment process for phase 2 of Cambridge South East Transport. Could I have the next slide, please? So I'm still seeing the introduction slide.
Yes.
Sorry, Michael, it's on my screen, it's moved forward. It's just, we've got a severe lag.
Right.
Just be a moment.
Thank you. Okay, so this is just to summarize the process. So in 2018, we started from the 3 strategy options presented in the 2018 consultation, noting that the strategy 1 off-road option had been identified and agreed by the board as the preferred strategy and the most supported strategy in that consultation. However, our process did reappraise options based on strategies 2 and 3, the on-road options, and the process considered a total of 11 possible park and ride site locations. So we started out with over 230 combinations. In a first sift, we eliminated 141 of those because they basically failed some simple tests that we had set for the acceptability of those options. That left us with 90 combinations to assess. The assessment of those 90 options distilled those down to 3 shortlisted park and ride site options or travel hubs and 5 possible route variations. And those were the options that were included in the autumn 2019 public consultation. In parallel with the consultation process, there was a further technical assessment of the shortlisted options. Can I have the next slide, please? A couple of key points in terms of the assessment of the travel hub locations. traffic analysis showed that we would get the highest site usage with a site that was located close to the junctions of the A11 with the A1307 or A505. Significant to that is that 50% of the traffic on the A1307 at Babraham has come from the A11, while 50% of traffic at the Abingtons actually turns on to the A11. So if you locate a park and ride site further east on the A1307, it would not directly intercept those journeys that come from the A11 onto the A1307. So you would have lower demand. You would also have a higher service cost because you would have to run the public transport service to and from the park and ride site over a longer distance, and that would require more vehicles to provide the same level of service. So all the sites are seeking to provide sustainable solutions with some flexibility in capacity between 2,000 and 2,500 spaces. Next slide, please. So this slide shows all of the travel hub site locations that have been considered in the assessment, including site 11 at Four Wentways and the combination of sites 10 between Newmarket Road and the A11, both of which were suggestions from the May 2019 LLF workshop. So those options were included in the assessment as a direct result of being put forward by the LLF and were reported on in the report to the June 2019 board meeting. Next slide, please. So out of the 11 sites considered, the 3 sites that were shortlisted and then included in the public consultation were the 3 sites that are shown in different colour there, which were redesignated sites A, B and C for the purpose of the public consultation. So site A is accessed from the A505, sites B and C are accessed from the A1307. Next slide, please. This slide compares the accessibility of the 3 shortlisted sites to the 2 main employment campuses, Babraham Research Campus and Granta Park. If you compare site B, which is the central image, you can see with the shading that the accessibility to both campuses is significantly better than either sites A or site C. Next slide, please. So this image is directly from the consultation leaflet. It shows the shortlisted route options, all of which follow a common section of route from the biomedical campus to the east of Shelford and Stapleford, directly past Sawston, and then after passing Sawston, they divide into 5 different routes. The purple route to site A, the pink and brown routes to site B, and the blue and black routes to site C. Next slide, please. Again, this is an image from the consultation leaflet showing the concept design for the intermediate stops on the route on the edge of Great Shelford, Stapleford and Sawston. So the intention is to provide high quality stop facilities, cycle parking and disabled car parking. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed high quality public transport network associated with the phase 2 infrastructure. So in summary, it is proposed there would be 8 peak services per hour running between the travel hub site and Cambridge city centre, serving the stops at Sawston, Stapleford, Great Shelford, the biomedical campus, and then using the existing guided busway to reach Cambridge rail station. Out of those 8 services per hour, 4, so every other service, would extend to Granta Park, and 2 services per hour would extend all the way to Haverhill using the express bus route along the A1307. So that would, so if that proposal is delivered, it would increase the number of express services between Cambridge and Haverhill at peak times from the present 4 to 6. So that's a 50% increase, and we think that's a practical aspiration reflecting the additional demand that this scheme would attract, and also the planned housing growth at Haverhill itself, which was mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. I'd like to discuss the alternative options that have been considered, although they were not originally included in the shortlisted options for very good reasons. Further work has been done on this particular option directly in response to feedback from stakeholders, notably the local parish councils. So the suggestion that was put forward was that instead of following the shortlisted options, the route should follow the former Haverhill branch line to the south of Stapleford. It should then run along the railway corridor as far as Great Shelford Station, and then continue to run alongside the railway to the north of Great Shelford, back to a point where it would join the shortlisted route options as shown in the plan. Next slide, please. So a comparative assessment of the railway route against the equivalent shortlisted options showed that in all cases, if the railway route variant of the shortlisted option would would perform more poorly than the shortlisted variant. So you can see in that table, the brown route is ranked 1. The variant of the brown route following the railway route would be ranked lower than that, and that's the same for all of the 5 shortlisted options. Next slide, please. So just to explain some of the key reasons for that inferior performance, the railway route alternative can use the alignment of the former branch line as far as Great Shelford Station, but routing north from that actually requires constructing a route directly through residential and commercial areas. It would also require a section of route to operate shared with general traffic on a residential road. That's Chaston Road. Operating in shared traffic through a quiet residential area, we took the view that it wouldn't be appropriate for these vehicles to run at a speed greater than 20 miles per hour on that section of route. The overall impact of this route on journey times is that the journey time for this route is longer, and that makes the service from the travel hub less attractive, and that reduced demand from the travel hub as a result of the longer journey time outweighs the additional local patronage that would be generated from running through Great Shelford. We have also had some further dialogue with Network Rail. There are issues in terms of the compatibility of this option with safeguarding of the alignment for both East West Rail and Cambridge South Station, considering that the Cambridge South Station proposal involves converting a double track section of railway to 4 tracking, and potentially for East West Rail a grade separated junction between East West Rail and the existing main line. So this scheme was, despite the fact that it hadn't made the shortlist, we have developed a design for this option to a similar level of detail to the shortlisted options, and we have costed that. The conclusion of that exercise was that the railway alignment would cost an additional £29.2 million compared to the shortlisted options. So that's a very significant amount of money. That additional cost is due both to increased construction costs and significantly increased land costs as a result of a requirement to acquire land from both residential and commercial properties, which obviously have a significantly higher value than agricultural land. Finally, because the scheme cannot be delivered without operation shared with general traffic, this alternative would not meet the combined authorities' objectives for a dedicated and segregated CAM route. So it's not CAM compliant. Just to show a few pictures to highlight some of those issues. Next slide, please. So the slide on the bottom left shows the pinch point directly north of Hinton Way at Great Shelford Station. You've got the station buildings on the left. You've got a residential property on the right. It's not possible to put a public transport route through that gap without either acquiring the station building or the adjacent residential property. Directly north of that, if you see the image bottom right, the route would have to pass directly through the car park of the Mill Court Business Park. It would take the majority of that land between the business park buildings and the railway where the line of parked cars is. Further north at where the scheme reaches Granham's Road, the image top right shows the Anglian Water pumping station at that location, essentially to try and deliver a route at this point. You are faced with a choice between acquiring and relocating the pumping station or diverting around that and acquiring a significant section of land from a adjacent residential property on the south side of Granham's Road. In addition to those issues, there are expected to be operational issues during construction, including likely closure of a railway, which will incur compensation payments to the train operating companies. Those payments are not included in the additional 29.2 million cost estimate. The key factors in terms of additional construction costs are modification to the bridge that carries the A1301 over the mainline railway, the need for a containment structure alongside the railway to separate the public transport route from the railway and mitigate the risk of a vehicle on the public transport route encroaching onto the railway. The route through the residential area we have already mentioned. So those are the key factors influencing the conclusions of the additional work done on the railway option directly in response to the requests last year. Next slide, please. So other options that have been considered are routing the alignment further away from Great Shelford and Stapleford. It was concluded that this wouldn't be beneficial, as it would take the stops further away from where demand existed, and it would put the service outside the CAM objectives as outlined on that slide. So for stops to be within 10 to 15 minutes walk of key destinations. Next slide, please. So there have been a number of more detailed suggestions made for route refinements in the consultation responses, generally to either reduce severance of fields and to address other specific, more localized impacts. All of these will be considered in developing the proposals further. They're not considered to be alternative options. They're considered to be refinements or potential developments of the option that is being presented to the Joint Assembly and the Executive Board. So absolutely they will be considered, but they're not incompatible with taking a preferred option forward. And these will be all within the scope of the formal environmental impact assessment of the preferred option. Thank you. That's the end of the presentation on options assessment.
I do have one or two written questions, but I've also got some people who'd like to speak. So I'm going to ask questions first from Howard Keatle.
Can you hear me?
If you could be a little louder, Howard, please.
A little louder. Okay, fine. Well, thank you, Mike, for that presentation. It's very heartening to hear that at last you have said that the alternative railway route is in fact feasible. We've been asking for 2 years for public consultation on this. When the 3 routes were put to public consultation, that consisted of 2 routes based on the A1307 and 1 cross-country route. There's never been any opportunity for public consultation on what is the best off-road route. And that is why it's taken until last week for us to actually see some detailed comparisons regarding the railway route. And I would say that the calculations and the analysis that you've put forward are incredibly complicated and open to interpretation. It really does depend upon your perspective as to how you see this all panning out. I mean, one prime example is you've mentioned that Chaston Road can't offer a segregated route. Well, I've undertaken some consultation. I'm told there is the space for Chaston Road land alongside there to offer a segregated route. So that totally impacts on the journey times that currently are being calculated. I think what concerns me is that we've never seen any environmental consideration put on your chosen route in comparison to the detail you've now undertaken on the railway route. Where on earth is the comparison between the two? And how on earth do you value the loss of these wonderful Cambridgeshire rolling hills when you carve a busway across them? And more than that, how do you cost for the loss of the fields between Stapleford and Shelford that marry up to the proposed route of this busway, when there's no way that we could object to development, because this is just creating a developer's charter to build out from the curtilage of the villages back up to this new bus line route. So my real question is, will you be willing to open up this to consultation. As I say, you haven't given us the consultation for an off-road route at all. So that's really my question. I could go into loads of detail about how crossings can work, about a more imaginative approach, about the grade separation that East-West Rail will require, and how a more ambitious scheme could work with that to its advantage. And I'm just intrigued that the cost of this alternative route has doubled to 30 million in the last 9 months. It just goes to show that a lot of it is really down to opinion, and we really need independent consultants to advise us before we go any further, and we put all of that to public consultation. Thank you.
If I could address part of that question, Howard. In our previous report, on Mott MacDonald's previous report on the railway route, which followed the work that was done by WSP before the 2018 consultation, they identified a cost of at least £15 million because the number of uncertainties, not least that at that time, we'd not been able to get any opinions from Network Rail. Indeed, actually, apart from some very brief comments, we're still in that position. However, we have pointed through Mott MacDonald some rail experts to look at the proposals and to come up with the costings that are now reported. But the original 15 million cost was stated as at least 15 million. It was qualified as being not complete at that stage. In terms of consultation, the sticking point really for us is that routing through a residential area on roads shared with other traffic is not, in our opinion, compatible with providing a high quality, high frequency, dedicated and segregated public transport route without compromising the quality of service. The Combined Authority has made clear in its LTP sub-strategy, which they have published, that the default position for CAM is a dedicated and segregated route, and this cannot be delivered at Chaston Road. GCP will not be consulting on an option that does not deliver the desired level of service and is incompatible with the requirements for CAM established by the Combined Authority.
Okay.
At that point, I'd like to invite James Montgomery to address the environmental questions.
Is James there?
James, can you talk to us, please?
Sorry, just trying to find the unmute button. And the environmental options are have been considered for both, well, for both the railway route and the others. The impact on the fields and of the routes that are make up the preferred scheme are recognised as having an adverse effect. They are properly accounted for in the assessment that was summarised in the table that Mike showed, where there was showed that any of the routes outside the segregated routes scored better than the railway alignment option. So the type of impacts that you would have of taking a railway option through are different, obviously. There would be a greater impact on people, and particularly from a noise perspective, there would be far more people exposed to noise from a bus route through the village, albeit recognizing there is other noise sources in that area. The bus route would be very close to some residential properties. So on the whole, they are different kind of impacts, and we have accounted for them in the assessment that was summarized by Mike in his slide.
Okay.
I'll go on, Howard, I want to go on to Brian, please. I've got several other speakers.
Thank you. Oh, excuse me. Thank you, Tony. Really, a question largely about the comparison with these routes. And you mentioned that there was an outcome of 10 to 15 minutes of key destinations. And the preferred route that we're seeing across the downs is at best on the edge of both, all three of Sawston, Stapleford and the Shelfords. So it seems to me that that is entirely running against the objectives and the practicalities of modal shift, because certainly if you look at some of the faraway places, so Pampersford, Southern Sawston, a little Shelford and so on, they're certainly not in walking distance of any stops that the Metro might be making in their vicinity.
We've tried to strike a balance between serving communities and the frequency of stops. And indeed, it's possible that we are at the upper limit of the number of stops we can provide and maintain the journey time, savings and frequency that is desired. In terms of the location on the outskirts of the communities, to a certain extent, that's unavoidable. So we follow the old railway line at Sawston, for example, and we can't get any closer to Sawston than that. Mike has already covered the issues regarding going through Stapleford and Sawston following the old, and Great Shelford following the old railway. But the fact is, regarding the catchment areas, is that there are a large number of people in Stapleford particularly who are not within that walking distance of Great Shelford Station, and so therefore are effectively deprived of high quality public transport. And there are a number of people who are on Hinton Way who are in a similar position. So the effect of providing our proposed stops, albeit that they're not as close to the centre of the communities as probably we would have liked, yet nonetheless they do increase the number of people who will be within walking distance, accessible distance of high quality and frequent public transport that meets the desired objectives of the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Combined Authority. One of the gateway criteria we established early on was not, for example, to demolish residential property, which prevented a route that would come closer on Hinton Way, for example, which would increase the catchment, but would have required acquiring one or two properties there, which we declined to do. In addition to that, we aim to improve accessibility to our system by working with the bus companies, working with the transport authorities to alter and revise bus timetables such that they will intersect. So for example, the City 7 already goes up Babraham Road away. We intend so that it will go up all the way to the travel hub before turning round to the stop on Babraham Road before turning round and coming back. And of course, there are new developments on the north edge of Sawston, which are currently under construction, that will benefit from our stop there. I fully recognise the issue regarding infill development at Great Shelford and Stapleford. That land will remain green belt. It will not be benefiting from any exemptions in the national planning policy framework that transport infrastructure will do, and it will be necessary for any developments there to go through the local plan and the planning process in the normal way. I have, however, said in previous meetings that if we provide improved public transport, we do, of course, address some of the objections to providing development, but nonetheless, any development will have to go through the normal planning process.
Just to add very briefly to that, if I may, Andrew, it's worth pointing out in relation to walking distances that there is research to support the fact that people are prepared to walk significantly further to access a high quality public transport service than an ordinary bus service. and there is ample evidence of that from the published Cambridgeshire Guided Busway post-opening research, which is freely available.
And indeed, some of the stops on the guided busway are not in the centre or even on the substantial edge of existing communities where the old railway line used to be, and hence some distance out of the village centres. However, it has not stopped that system from carrying 4.5 million passengers per annum.
I've got 4 more people to ask questions, and I've also got some written questions. I just want to at least alert people listening to this meeting to be aware of. So the next question is from John Burns.
There you go. Hi guys again. Thank you very much. Interesting that last thing about the walk to stops. If the cam ever does get to Haverhill, remember we've got 400-foot hills on either side of the valley. People may walk to it, but they probably won't walk home from it. Sort of all related questions to do with capacity actually of any system. Obviously we're in the middle of the COVID-19. I don't know whether there's been any modelling at all of what's going to happen post, all the various options that happen post, because there's lots of companies already saying that they're no longer going to have big office blocks or big things like that in place, and after 20 years after I used to do it, people are starting to use things like Zoom. So that's very interesting on that. I don't know, I've asked this question many times before, how the GCP, the Combined Authority, and West Suffolk in particular talk to one another. I know they apparently do, but nobody ever comes back to me being a district councillor for Haverhill. But I'm expanding on what I said earlier on. Currently, we're in the process of building about 3,900 houses in Haverhill. Under Scheller, for the new local plan, there are plans for another 2,500 houses in Haverhill, but we've only identified, and with very little employment land, about 600 jobs. So the vast majority of those people, which I'm estimating probably about 7,000 to 8,000 people, will commute. And the vast majority will go along towards the Cambridge sub-region, whether it's the Granta Park or beyond, whatever it might be. And I'm really concerned about, we're talking about 2 extra bus services on a route, and also a park and ride or travel hub, whatever you want to call it, that's going to have, I think it was 2,800 spaces. That the people of Shelford and all those things, they're going to see their lovely new metro type thing come along and not be able to get on it because all the people from Haverhill and elsewhere would have filled it up. So I don't know what modelling has been done about all those extra people that will be travelling towards the Cambridge sub-region. Thank you.
Mike, can you answer that
Yes.
question?
So the network proposal that I summarised which does include 2 additional services all the way from Haverhill, adding to the 4 that exist at the moment. So that would give you 6 services per hour from Haverhill to Cambridge at peak, compared to 8 from the travel hub. So it's not that much less. So the reason for that was specifically why we included enhancements all the way to and from Haverhill in our proposal, was to recognise the data from, for example, the biomedical campus transport needs study that shows a large number of people who work at the biomedical campus travel daily from the Haverhill area. So the proposed level of service is balanced with our current assessment of demand. If demand proves to be higher than that, the nature of this scheme is it would be very easy to add additional services. So, for example, instead of having 4 services running as far as Granta Park and only 2 going to Haverhill, all 4 that go to Granta Park could perfectly practically be extended to Haverhill if the demand warranted that. And it's also worth noting that our network proposal would provide a direct link between Haverhill and Granta Park, whereas the existing bus services stick to the A1307 and don't serve Granta Park.
Okay, I'm going to move on to Russ Moore, please.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Could you be a bit louder, please?
Yeah, yeah. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, my point was about something you discussed actually. Just back while the other chap discussed. It's about the route running through Shelford and Stapleford, because to me it doesn't seem to make much sense, because as you can see through the map, and as one of the gentlemen who spoke before said, if you look at the map, you can see about 90% of people are much closer to the train station. So it seems like, like somebody said, obviously you're cutting through the countryside to provide something that's going to give a service to about just a fraction of people up Hinton Way and a fraction of people in Stapleford. So it doesn't seem to make sense when it's going to be a lot easier for most people to get to a train station that's already there. It seems like, when you build a transport system like this, it should be serving somewhere that doesn't already have a transport system. But this obviously already has one. It has a train station. So to me, to spend that kind of money and damaging the countryside to do something that's going to serve a very small number of people, to me doesn't seem to make much sense. And it would seem to make more sense to have the route that runs along the A1307. So I wanted you to just explain why you think it does make sense to do that.
Mike, can you answer that question?
Well, the consideration of a route alongside the A1307 was addressed in the 2018 public consultation and the assessment of the responses to that. It should be noted that building a public transport route alongside the A1307 is still going to have a significant impact on land, and in some cases it runs through more sensitive areas closer to the Gog Hills. So, building a route alongside the A1307 does not come without, a comparable environmental impact to the off-road option. And there are and wouldn't there is really no intermediate sources of demand between Babraham Research Campus and the biomedical campus. So it wouldn't serve Sawston, Stapleford and Shelford at all. So the route skirting the edge of the villages does, it does have a catchment area that includes parts, by no means all of those villages, but the catchment area, considering the catchment area for a high quality public transport service as opposed to an ordinary bus service, does cover areas that a route alongside the A1307 wouldn't serve at all.
Could I move on to Jim Rickard?
Yeah, hold on a minute. I'm sorry, I was just going to say, but I thought this really answered the question about the fact that it's such a small amount of people. That I mean, where is the evidence that residents from Shelford and the Shelfords and Stapleford actually want this? Because obviously I haven't done a survey or anything myself, but I'm on forums and I talk to people, and there doesn't seem to be, or very few people who actually want this. So where is the data or the evidence that people from these villages actually want this system running through?
Perhaps it would be appropriate to await the presentation on the public consultation before addressing that question.
I would just like to say is that, of course, Well, taking your point about Shelford and Stapleford already being served by the railway station, is that there is still a body of people in Stapleford who are not within easy walking distance of Great Shelford Station, who this would serve. But of course, we are looking at a system which will reach out further than that towards Sawston, which doesn't currently have a rail service, towards Granter Park, Baberham Research, which currently equally are not connected to rail, and eventually to Haverhill. So Great Shelford and Stapleford are points along a route that reaches out to serve a larger group of people, and indeed about 50% of the users of the system will come from Park and Ride at the A11.
Okay, could I move on to Jim Rickard, please? Jim?
Yes, hello. Is my sound okay?
Yes, it's fine.
In which case, thank you very much. I support fully the points made by Howard Cattell, but in the event that we end up with the shortlisted route, and if we look again at this section to the northeast of Stapleford and Great Shelford, across the fields that others have referred to, could you comment on what can be done to mitigate the visual impact on that section? And specifically, could we envisage the track level, the base of the busway, being lower than the level of the surrounding land, so that the vehicles and the busway itself to some extent disappear in a cutting? Thank you.
James, can you answer that question?
Yeah, no. In terms of mitigating visual impact, the design of the route would have to take into account the existing landscape character to try and ensure that whatever planting scheme or otherwise was introduced in terms of mitigation did not substantially alter that character. So, for example, in an area where you have open fields, one might be considering introducing hedgerows and so on alongside the route to try and screen it. But that might alter the landscape character in a direction that wasn't deemed desirable by from that perspective. So what we would be doing is trying to look at ways that you can screen it. In some places, it will be possible to plant planting up around it so that visual impact on maybe nearby residents and so on are minimized in due course of time. Obviously, planting doesn't happen overnight. There will be places where it will be screened by topography and views will be limited. We have looked at some of the viewpoints that are, and will continue to do more detailed looking at viewpoints and views to assess what the opportunities are for either naturally screening the routes through topography or by introducing planting, or in some areas we may be able to introduce low bunds to maybe hide the actual infrastructure of the road itself. The idea of putting in deep cutting so that the route was not visible at all is unlikely to be taken forward, principally because of two reasons. One is putting in a deep cutting has itself a significant visual impact on the landscape that would be completely at odds with the current landscape character. And the other one would be cost. It is very significantly more expensive to put in a substantial cutting of any length. So, you know, the cost implications of doing a deep cutting I would rule that out as well. There are
some form of cutting could perhaps be provided.
Yeah, I was going to say there are opportunities in some places where the route would have to be relatively level across the width of the road. And so in some places you may find that the road does cut into the side of a slope to a degree, and that material that's excavated to do that could be used to create some small low bunds around it that might hide, as I say, it would hide the infrastructure of the routes, so you would see the road less from afar, but you would be unlikely to hide the buses themselves, which would be temporary and itinerant features crossing landscape. That is something that is relatively unavoidable, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Okay, could I move on to Rhys Slough, please?
Sorry to interrupt, Tony. Trumpeton Residents Association have raised that they submitted 2 questions in writing and they have to leave very shortly. I was wondering if we could have them first. David Plank may have sent you 2 questions in writing.
Yes, he has. Yes, I was going to go on to those. I'm going to just stop the questions from members online, and I'm just going to go through 1 or 2 of the questions that we've had written in. There's 2 from the Hobson's Conduit Trust about statements about 9 wells. Let me just, it's a very long question, but it basically is saying, I can find no mention of 9 wells in the paper that is going to joint assembly and presumably then onto the executive board. I'm just trying to get this question up. Yes.
That question has also been put in as a written question for the assembly meeting.
Oh, has it?
We will be providing a written answer to that, but in generality, it is our intention to protect and enhance the 9 Wells Nature Reserve and also to protect the Hobson's Conduit.
Yeah, I mean, basically the key questions are, on behalf of the Trust, I'd like to know how and when we can expect the environmental appraisal report to be discussed and corrections to be made and the shortcomings addressed. And secondly, on behalf of the Trust, I'd want to know when we can expect a formal discussion with your project team, not only about what mitigation steps you propose to take in relation to 9 wells, but what steps you intend to take in relation to Hobson's Brook, which the scheme crosses. So that, in a sense, relates to the environmental impact of the suggested routes, similar to the last question. And then there's also another question about the section 12 of the report that Joint Assembly does not make an environmental commitment to protect and mitigate the impact on the 9 Wells Nature Reserve. And it asks what's going to be done about that. So there are those 2 questions. Then there's the Trumpington Residents Association question, as Rhys rightly says. One is there an intention that there should be 1 or 2 dedicated bus routes on Francis Crick Avenue? And which side of the avenue will they be located? And the second one is about, in order to be, oh, sorry, this is from James Littlewood, also online, about in order to be compliant with CAM strategy, the busway would need to be segregated. However, it's only segregated as far as the roundabout on Francis Crick Avenue. One would then have to run on highway to negotiate the roundabout and then along Francis Crick Avenue until it reaches the guided busway. How does the GCP intend to make this section compliant with CAM policy?
Okay, I'll try and address all those questions.
And then I'll come back to you, Rhys.
In relation to Francis Crick Avenue, we are looking at 2, broadly speaking, 2 solutions, one of which is to have a dedicated segregated corridor running up the centre of a widened Francis Crick Avenue with access roads on the outside to reach the development plots. The other is a mirror image of that, whereby there would be a dedicated segregated route in each direction on the outside with road access up the middle. We are in discussion with Network Rail and East West Rail and the Biomedical Campus and others regarding developing these proposals. And to some extent, a final solution really depends on a decision on the location of Cambridge South Station. We've determined so far that we can accommodate with varying degree of difficulty all three proposed locations, but we can't finalise our proposals on Francis Crick Avenue until we have had further discussions with the biomedical campus, who have been understandably somewhat distracted by the present crisis in front of us, and also a decision from Network Rail and the Department for Transport on the location of a Cambridge South station. We are confident we can accommodate all three, but the detail is dependent on further discussions. Regarding 9 Wells, generally, is the board made a commitment in 2018 where they requested that officers, through our consultants, draw up detailed environmental plans to enhance the route and create a sort of green corridor linear park alongside the route. Although 9 Wales wasn't particularly specifically mentioned in that, it has been our understanding since then that this was to include 9 Wells, and we have made and will continue to make a commitment to protect and enhance 9 Wells as we move forward with our more detailed proposals.
Rhys, has that answered your question, or did you want to come back?
Sorry, this is Alistair speaking. That original question wasn't from Rhys. That was just me raising that Trumpington Residents Association had a written question and needed to leave very soon. I'll put Rhys on now.
Hi, good evening. Can you hear me?
Yeah, the only written question I got from David Bush was about the 2 dedicated CSET bus routes on Francis Crick Avenue.
Tony, we've got Rhys online now.
Okay.
Hi, sorry. I think a number of people have touched on some of the points, but as someone that lives near the corner of Stapleford that's in question for this bus stop, having moved here, we made the very conscious decision that it was in cycling distance and had an established bus route in the number 7. So I think the local benefits to this corner are few. There are not a lot of houses in this corner, and most of us would be either happy to walk to the number 7 or to the train station, or would cycle and quickly get to the DNA path. So I think the benefits for Stapleford and Shelford are few, and the benefits extend further out to Sawston and the new proposed park and rides. I think what seems to be is there's a two-pronged approach. So there seems to be the main benefits are to reduce the traffic along the road, which passes past the Gog Magog Cafe and the research campuses from the A11 interchange. I'm almost tempted to suggest that maybe we should build the park and ride, extend Babram, and then maybe encourage people to stop driving down this route and then see where we stand, because it almost seems like we're running 2 concurrent solutions and we're not really going to see the benefit of a much easier one. And what we are going to see is an impact to the local residents of Shelford and Stapleford without much benefit. I think Hinton Way and Haverhill Road and the areas you're going to see a detriment of people parking to get access to these bus stops, but we also don't want to see large car parks popping up near them. And yeah, I'm not really sure, and I get people might want to go the other way, but I think we've seen a lot of the new cycle route from Sawston and all of these benefits. So I almost feel that a better number of park and ride services from the park and ride and improved cycleways are actually what the local and near villages are going to need, and the distant ones. Otherwise, I just feel you'll create these alternatives. People are still going to drive and fill the roads, and you'll just saturate both options and only really get negatives.
Andrew, do you want to respond?
We consulted in 2018 on 2 road-based solutions with a bus lane extending from a park and ride in the vicinity of the A1307 A11 junction, and also what we call Strategy 1, which was the off-highway route via Sawston and Great Shelford. and there was a reasonably significant proportion indicating much stronger support for the off-highway option via Stapleford and Great Shelford to Sawston than there was for the on-highway options. We've re-examined those on-highway options again as part of this next phase of study, and they still don't provide the level of service that we in the Combined Authority are looking for out of this future system. And as you say, this is also about a system which goes on beyond Stapleford to Sawston and points east, and eventual extension to Haverhill. We have worked on the basis of a 960 metre walking distance, 2 kilometre cycling distance from our stops as being the catchment, and it will bring a significant number of people within reach of high quality public transport who are not currently offered that at Great Shelford station.
Just one point on cycling. The scheme does propose a shared use path for walkers, cyclists, and equestrians alongside the public transport route. So for those in Sawston, Stapleford, and Shelford who are in the areas of the village closest to the public transport route, that will provide them with a high quality direct cycle route through to the biomedical campus if people prefer to cycle rather than use public transport.
Okay, could I move on to Jeff Hale, please?
Can you hear me now, Tony?
A little bit louder, Jeff, please.
Okay. I'd just like to follow upon a comment that John Burns made in that in the light of COVID-19, does generally the whole business case need to be reassessed? We don't know whether there's going to be reduced economic growth, which may lead to fewer new jobs, less housing, could be less commuting and more home working, and that could change the whole scenario of what's being proposed here. So obviously we don't have a solution, and we don't know where we'll be, as Andrew Munro rightly said earlier on. So should there really be a hold put on further development of this for perhaps 12 months, and then it should be looked at again?
There are a number of stages for the scheme to go through yet. So at this point, we're simply seeking or making a recommendation as to a preferred option for further development. The business case will be developed and will be reviewed as we prepare a Transport and Works Act application for the necessary planning consent to construct the scheme. That will have to be initially submitted to the Department for Transport, and they will scrutinise the business case and the case for the scheme as part of that process. It will then come to an independent public inquiry for examination by an independent planning inspector. And even if we get through that stage and the inspector recommends to the Secretary of State that the order be made, and the Secretary of State decides to make that order, there will still need to be a full final business case presented to the Executive Board for scrutiny to proceed to the next phase of construction. So there are a number of stages at which the business case will both evolve and will be subject to scrutiny. And I'm sure that our own Executive Board will be wanting to hold us to account if they feel that the playing field has significantly changed in terms of public transport provision. But at the moment, I don't think anybody can really say how this is going to pan out, whether or not we might actually get increased demand for public transport, or not. But there will be a number of stages for the scheme to further evolve through, at which the business case will be reappraised and will be subject to scrutiny.
Okay, could I move on to James Littlewood, please? Yeah, James, you asked a number of questions. Are you happy to have written responses to the questions that you've put in?
Tony, hi, thanks. James Littlewood from Cambridge Past, Present and Future. I was going to suggest that if you give me a written response to the ones that I've written in, then that would be fine. Just for the benefit of others, these are in relation to some of the information provided around journey, reliability, economic benefit, and potential backing up onto the A11 roundabout. I'd be happy to receive responses of those. But if I could just pick up a couple of points. One is just to refute a bit the response on the Greenbelt issue about the route remaining in the Greenbelt. This is more complex than was made out in the answer received, in the sense that the future status of that land would be determined by someone looking at it independently as to whether it should still be included in the Greenbelt. Now, if it's got a busway running through it, it may well know that land may well no longer serve the purposes of the Greenbelt, and it therefore will be taken out of the Greenbelt and built upon. So I think it is misleading to say that by staying in the Greenbelt at this stage, it would be protected in future. That's certainly not the case. I do have a couple of other things that I'd just like to raise. One is that having now picked a preferred park and ride site, we are wondering whether the brown and the purple routes are not so radically different, and whether they might be considered as really a kind of detailed route selection rather than a strategic option. And we'd like to, if possible, keep both options on the table. The reason being is that we're concerned that the brown route might have a significant more environmental impact than the purple route. But given that the further environmental impact assessment work is yet to take place, by excluding one of them, we won't find out which is the better of the two. And actually, I think that's a requirement of the EIA process. So I'm wondering whether we can request that for the next stage, at least the brown and the purple routes remain on the table as sort of options in route design rather than strategic options. And my second question is, as I'm aware in relation to one of the other busway schemes that the GCP is working on, as they started to develop the business case further, they've eventually arrived at an option between, one solution and a do nothing solution, which obviously we're deeply unhappy with. And I want to just be reassured that in this scheme, we won't end up similarly with a do nothing option, and that the highway, an on-highway option or another off-road option will remain on the table as a comparator, so that when a final decision is made by the GCP board, that they have two options to choose rather than effectively a zero option. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, James. Yes, the business cases always have to include a low-cost option, so that will be presented in the business cases going forward. And of course, the Department for Transport and the planning inspector will be very keen to know what other options are being considered. In relation to the refinement of the route options, I think you'll find it's the pink route that goes on to the travel hub at Baber, and the purple route ended at Site A, but that's an academic point. It is our intention in the next stage to, as Mike indicated earlier, to further refine and polish the proposals and to consider observations and comments made regarding the detailed location of routes, and indeed some form of hybrid of those proposals is possible. I am aware of objections from Pampersford Hall to the pink route option in the Site A, but I'm also aware of concerns from Cheveley Park Farms regarding the brown route. And we'd be very keen to work with yourself, Pampersford Hall, Cheveley Park Farms, Baberham Parish, and other stakeholders in the development of the route in that area.
Thank you. Thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, James's written questions weren't the only written questions, and I hope that after this meeting, the written questions will be published with a response to each of those. Yes? Agreed?
Yes, they will be.
Yeah, good. Okay. John Latham, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I just wanted to reiterate that from the point of view of Hobson's Conduit Trust, we absolutely do want to engage at an early stage, and we want to have some very specific discussions. So whilst I welcome the general statement that you are now focused on doing things that will mitigate the impact of this route and scheme on 9 Wells, I want to re-emphasize on behalf of the trustees that we absolutely do want to have an early engagement with you and some serious and very specific discussions. We're already achieving that with Network Rail in relation to Cambridge South, and this will not be treated as an exception by you as something that can be brushed off. So please, will you focus on that and make sure that you include us and engage with us?
Yeah, we will do. You will be aware from the media that there have been various discussions with the combined authority regarding GCP projects, which has held up bringing this report to the board for approval, and has also held our hand or stayed our hand in terms of being able to have some of the discussions we would have liked to have had, further inhibited by the national crisis currently facing us. But rest assured, we will be beating a path to your door, even if it's just virtually, as soon as we've got through this next stage.
Thank you very much indeed.
Yeah, I mean, that just reinforces the point I made earlier about engagement with stakeholders, landowners, local communities and councillors on each of these schemes and each part of it. Barbara Keitel, sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, a little louder, please.
Okay, certainly. I'm coming back really to the bus stops and the accessibility and the reason for people to use this particular route. My argument would be that we are being at Stapleford and Great Shelford are being used as a sacrificial lamb for this. The routes that's been suggested will in no way enhance our journey time personally into Cambridge or into the biomedical centres or into any research centre. Basically, we have routes. We have the DNA route for the cyclists. We have the train. We have a good bus service. We have the Baberham Park and Ride. We have routes in already. If we have to be the sacrificial lamb and have this route across our land, then please, will you not put any bus stops on it for Great Shelford and Stapleford? There is no way anybody in Stapleford is going to walk uphill to get to you, to then buy a ticket, assuming we can get on it because the Haverhill people have already filled the buses. We're going to buy a ticket. We're going to go as far as Adam Brooks. We're then going to transfer onto either a bus and buy another ticket, or we're going to go onto the train at Cambridge South and go into Cambridge and buy a ticket there. There is absolutely no way anybody in their right mind would do any of that route. And so my question is, why do we have to have bus stops there? Great Shelford and Stapleford do not want to access this in any way whatsoever. The only people who would want to access it at those two bus stops are the supposed people that are going to live in the houses which will infill the green belt that's left behind. The people that you are actually planning for that don't exist at the moment.
Barbara, can I just correct one point? It will not be necessary to change vehicles and buy another ticket to reach Cambridge rail station or Cambridge city centre from the Stapleford and Shelford stops. The proposal is a through service 8 times an hour.
Right into the city centre?
Right into the city centre.
So it's going on the main roads then?
No, it will.
No, it's following the guided busway.
On the guided busway?
We turn into the guided busway at Addenbrooks.
Which doesn't get you into the city centre?
It will do when the Cam Tunnel sections are completed.
Okay, so we still have to transfer onto other traffic.
No, it'll be
and
a
the
through
routes
service.
to get from Stapleford and Great Shelford to your proposed 2 stops is steeply uphill. People are not going to do it.
Thank you, Barbara. We've had this conversation before.
I know we have.
I think
we've heard
the fact is that we're providing stops because we believe that people will want to use it. Should the modelling show that people do not want to use it, then I'm sure we won't waste the money to provide the stops. So if, as the analysis goes on, the local community object to providing a stop, and there's no demonstrable demand for it, then we may not provide a stop. It's as simple as that.
Anyway, I'm going to move on now because I've got no further speakers. I'm going to move on to phase 2, the public consultation, and Andrew to do a quick presentation.
Okay, can I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So we carried out a consultation in November last year. We received just short of 700 responses, and there were a great number of questions, which I won't go into the detail. The full report is available on our website. But in terms of support for the proposals, we had 56% of people expressing either strong support or support, and half of those expressing strong support. And we had a similar number of people to those expressing strongly support, expressing strongly oppose, but a smaller number expressing just oppose. So we therefore had a majority in favour of the proposals of 56%, reflecting but not identical to the level of support shown in the 2018 consultation, with a small number of people expressing no opinion. In terms of the responses from Stapleford and Great Shelford, I would just like to note that we had 100 responses from Great Shelford, and we had 77 responses from, sorry, I think it was the other way around, 77 responses from Great Shelford and 100 responses from Stapleford. Next slide. In terms of support for the travel hub sites, again, there was more support expressed than opposition, particularly in respect to site B, where there was 46% in favour of that location compared to 38% for site A and just 30% for site C. And we had 43% opposing site C, 37% opposing site A, but just 30% opposing site B. And Mike has previously outlined the reasons for, in terms of location, economic benefit, costs and others for adopting site B as our preferred location. And the next slide, please. And in terms of the support for the routes and the sites combined, the most strongly supported was the brown route with the travel hub site B at 35%, and the most strongly opposed was the black route with site C. But again, there was a slightly greater number supporting the combination of route and travel hub as there was opposing it, but in all cases, a third or more who expressed no opinion. And the next slide. At that point, we can take any questions, but as I said, the full report is available together with the raw data on the Greater Cambridge Partnership website.
I haven't got any questions, so can we move on to the preferred option recommendations as to what this is all leading up to?
Over to you, Mike.
Okay, thank you, Tony. So the first slide summarises the overall appraisal results for the shortlisted options. So this is a multi-criteria assessment considering 7 main themes across the top. I won't go into the detail of this, but the detail is all in the options assessment report, which has been published as an appendix to the report. The key points to note is that the 2 highest ranked options are the 2 options serving travel hub site B, the brown route ranked 1 and the pink route ranked 2. So this technical assessment in terms of the top 2 ranked options aligns with the results of the public consultation. Next slide, please. So this is the purely economic assessment of the options. This is where we get a slightly different result from the overall assessment and the consultation. So purely in economic terms, the best performing option is the purple route to site A. That is essentially simply because that option is cheaper, because the route runs has to run a shorter distance to site A. So so that's purely a cost saving, not a higher level of benefit. And so the economic assessment is only one element of the assessment, and it considers a relatively narrow range of criteria compared to the overall assessment. So you can see the brown and pink. Brown route to site B is in a clear second place, followed by the pink route, and the 2 options for site C are, in addition to being the least supported options in the public consultation, are also the worst performing options in terms of cost benefit ratio. You can see that they are significantly more expensive than the options to site A and site B, largely because an additional bridge across the A11 is required to extend the route to site C. Next slide, please. Just to summarize the Greenbelt assessment. So there was an independent Greenbelt assessment report on the shortlisted options prepared for GCP by LDA Design. This was done independently from the Mott MacDonald work. The key points from that are that the scheme does fall within the list of permitted developments in the National Planning Policy Framework, provided that it can be considered to demonstrate a requirement for a Greenbelt location. And because Cambridge is surrounded by Greenbelt, it would not be possible to provide any kind of off-road public transport route on a radial route to destinations beyond the Greenbelt without actually passing through the Greenbelt itself. So in terms of the specific conclusions on degree of harm to the Greenbelt from the proposals, the LDA design conclusion is that the degree of harm would be between moderate, moderate to minor, and minor. And that with careful and robust landscaping and retention of as much of the existing vegetation as possible, harm to the Greenbelt would be minimised. So there are a number of practical ways in which, in developing the design of the scheme, the harm to the Greenbelt could be reduced relative to that moderate to minor range. Next slide, please. So there's also a planning appraisal of the options has been done. This concludes that the proposed Cambridge to Haverhill transport project, of which this scheme forms a part, is contained in the Cambridgeshire Transport Delivery Plan, which forms part of the adopted local transport plan. So in overall terms, the proposals are consistent with the National Planning Policy Framework and also with the South Cambridgeshire District Council and Cambridge City Council adopted local plans. Next slide, please. So this slide shows what we call the adjusted benefit cost ratio for the preferred option. So you can see this is 0.81 compared to 0.71 for the brown option in the previous slide. The additional benefits increasing the BCR to 0.81 are reliability benefits, basically benefits that users of the public transport service will experience due to more reliable journey times, and also wider economic impacts related to the transport scheme. It's worth noting that because none of the development sites adjacent to the route, for example, residential development sites in Sawston allocated in the local plan, because none of these sites are dependent on the delivery of this scheme, no benefits attributable to land value uplift in relation to those development sites have been included as benefits to this scheme. So just to be clear, the wider economic benefits related to specific individual development sites in this assessment are zero. So it's fair to say that there is still some work to do to further improve the benefit cost ratio for the scheme, but there is also considerable potential to do that. So these benefit cost ratios are essentially for the purpose of the option selection process. They do not represent the ultimate potential for the benefit cost ratio for a fully developed and refined preferred option. They also take no account of the potential for the CAM project to enhance the benefits of the scheme. The assessment assumes CAM isn't a committed scheme, so the assessment does not allow for any enhancement of benefits that CAM would be deliver. It also doesn't allow for any additional benefits that would arise from the implementation of demand management policies within Cambridge city centre, which are under consideration by GCP separately as part of the city access project. Finally, at this stage, the benefits do not include any health impact assessment, particularly for the benefits of the non-motorised user route running alongside the public transport route in terms of increased physical activity and the potential reduced absenteeism and mortality benefits that are associated with an increase in physical activity. All of that will be assessed as part of the further assessment of the preferred route based on forecasts of the expected usage of the parallel NMU route. But as most of the route was the same for all of the shortlisted options, it was not a distinguishing factor between the shortlisted options. Next slide, please. So coming to the conclusions. So as I said, Travel Hub Site C has been rejected fundamentally because it's the most costly option and it's the least supported option in the consultation, and as a result of being most costly has the lowest benefit cost ratio. The brown option was identified as the preferred option from both the multi-criteria assessment and from the consultation feedback. In contrast, the purple option was the best performing option in terms of value for money due to its lowest cost. Wider factors to be considered are the purple option is the poorest located for the A1307 and A11 and is poorly located, particularly for Babraham research. That was apparent from the earlier slide that showed the 3 travel hub site locations and catchment areas alongside each other. So the brown option, although it is acknowledged it has a lower BCR than the purple option, is the most strongly supported option. It's the best located option for the A11, the A1307, Babraham Research and Granta Park. It is also the best located option to facilitate a potential future route extension to Haverhill as proposed by the CAM project. So this brings us to the final recommendation. Next slide, please. So the recommended preferred option is the brown route and travel hub site B, as shown on the next slide. So you can see you've got
that's
travel.
The recommendation that is going to be discussed at the Greater Cambridge Partnerships Joint Assembly on Thursday. I think we've had a good discussion all the way through about what people think about the merits or otherwise of the proposal. I've got John Burns who wants to say something.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Michael, for that. I think the decision about which one is preferred is probably okay. I am a little bit concerned about the cost ratio. I know it's 0.81 at the moment. Ideally, it's going to have to go above 2 to make it beneficial. And I don't know what your thoughts are, what you're hoping to see it eventually get to after all the detailed is done. But secondly, I just want to make a comment about the lack of any real consultation in Haverhill other than the few leaflets that were passed to us. Obviously, there was incorrect information published and people ended up at the wrong location. And I got numerous complaints from people after I put it on social media that they were not able to have a proper consultation. So something, again, considering we're a town of 30,000 going towards 40 and possibly by 2040, 60,000 people, we need to consider that. Thank you.
Yes, John, I mean, we obviously had 2 events in Haverhill, but I apologise if there was any confusion over location. Regarding the benefit cost ratio, this is part of a much bigger project, but unfortunately Department for Transport rules do not allow us to consider some of the benefits of other projects strictly to web tag rules. However, when in the previous phase we did look at the bigger picture regarding growth, demand management in Cambridge, and other developments that we weren't taking account of in this one, we did get a benefit cost ratio of order of 2. And as you say, that will be the target to achieve. But at this stage, as Mike set out, it's simply a decision making factor between different options within the 5-case model set out by the Department for Transport for appraising transport schemes.
Okay, Robert Atwood.
I was just looking at that map, and there's a significant discrepancy in the transport route proposals, in the site B there through to Babraham. The phase 2 map, which is obviously published there, identifies potential connecting bus services and cycle service routes passing along the new route, no one's ever heard of this, through the private land into the centre of Babraham via Honeysuckle Lane.
That's not the case that it's via Honeysuckle Lane.
I hope not, because
it's just a drafting issue, and that blue dotted line along that axis is simply a cycleway proposal. With a limited number of colours available to show this. The bus route would be via the A1307.
Yeah, but the actual cycleway bus route, or whatever you want to call it, should be going from the footbridge through to Babram. That's the one that should be, I think you said it was going to be upgraded.
At the moment, it's a track across the field, and we've been in discussions with Cheveley Park Farms for some time over upgrading that to a decent cycleway. The tripping point so far has been their objection to the route going through the farmyard at Babram High Street, a concern that we share, but we've so far been unable to identify an alternative, which we will be going on to do so, and we will be coming to talk to Babram Parish Council, Cheveley Park Farm, others, including Linda Worth of the BHS, regarding these proposals. At the moment, these are simply indicative.
Well, yes, because it would make a huge difference to Babram. If not, it would be incredibly dangerous to do it. It was just worrying to see it marked on the map, and
it's just an indicative proposal.
Okay, well, let's hope it can be moved on.
So there's the promise of further consultation and discussion with the Babram Parish Council and others, landowners and so on. Can we move on to the next steps, please, so that people can see what the future in terms of decision making is, please? So over to Jane.
Okay. We have the Joint Assembly meeting on the 4th of June. So these are the recommendations that that will be presented to them already on the Joint Assembly papers have been published. So notably, to note the outcome of the public consultation, just presenting that to them, that's also been published. So you can read through that. And then to endorse the key conclusions of the outline business case. That's also available on the website for if you want to review any of that. And they were also looking for recommendations with regards to authorizing the further development of the scheme design and mitigation measures. And then the submission of a Transport and Works Act order. Next slide, please. And this is the program taking us from where we are, which is the 4th of June for the Joint Assembly meeting. The 25th of June is the Exec Board, waiting on a decision from them for the preferred option. And then spring 2021, we have the Transport and Works Act application that will be going in. And then late 2021, public inquiry, start of works early 2023, and completion tentatively fixed for late 2024.
And clearly there are key stages in there which the scheme will need to pass to proceed to the next stage. Yes. So before there can be a start of works, there would need to be a favourable decision from the Secretary of State in response to the inspector's report on the Transport and Works Act application and the outcome of the public inquiry.
And at various stages as well, there will be consultation with all stakeholders.
So the next key meeting is on Thursday this week, which is a meeting of the GCP's Joint Assembly, followed 3 weeks later by the Executive Board meeting, where the Executive Board will be the decision-making body.
And we're also hoping to go straight back out to stakeholders and engage with them once we, after the meeting on the 25th.
Well, I'd like to thank 51 participants for being with us for the whole length of this meeting. This is a rather long meeting, but people did have a lot to say on these phase 1 and phase 2 proposals. And I hope you feel that you've all had an opportunity to make your views very clearly known, both to the panel, and I shall be taking the views expressed to the Joint Assembly and to the Executive Board. So thank you to all those who've attended, all those who've asked questions, made comments, and to all people who've presented at this meeting tonight. So thank you all very much. I'm sorry it went on so long, but I hope you found it helpful and informative. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you for Greater Cambridge Partnership as well.
Sorry?
Thank you from Greater Cambridge Partnership as well.
Yeah, yeah. And I was just going to say, don't forget, we'll publish the results, the written questions as soon as possible. Okay, thank you very much indeed.